What's up, folks? I'm Deeg, here to share Deeg's thoughts on what? Well, it's a few numbers. And let's say hi to Twitch. Before I go any further, this show, Deeg Thoughts, is recorded every single week on Monday night, starting around 6 to 8 p.m. Pacific time. Yes, it varies a lot. I'm sorry for that, but that's just the way things go. So if you want to catch this live, join the conversation, and hang out afterwards, come on over to Twitch. But without further ado, let's talk about 80-25. So last week, I had a call-in from Raka, who y'all might know as someone who's a big fan of raids and Guild Wars 2 and Final Fantasy, and we had a really fun, long discussion just talking about all the kind of factors going on in the MMO market this year, specifically thinking ahead to Guild Wars 2's third expansion release, End of Dragons. When should it come out? When would it be good for it to come out? What kind of marketing should we expect? What kind of marketing would be good or useful? It's a really cool talk, and if you haven't listened to it, I encourage you to go back and do so at some point. But I got a great comment on that video, and it inspired me to talk about this topic. I'm going to have a look at that comment. Here we go, right here. By the way, I read all the comments on my videos, and a lot of times I shoot back a response. You actually see one here. I read everything. So please tell me what you think. And this is from George A. And he has two parts to this comment in response to the conversation I had with Raka. I'm going to focus here on the first part. The second part is good too and worth looking at, but it's not what I want to talk about today. On the topic of the community of a game, it is important to understand that all the content, Reddit posts, YouTube videos, Twitch streams, comments, upvotes, downvotes, etc. are only 5% of the player base. It's way too small a sample size, and they are way too self-selecting. What I'm trying to say is getting a feel for a game's health or tone is impossible from a player's perspective. For further reading, these are great articles. And here are the three numbers, boys and girls. So where are we? We've landed at askagamedev.tumblr.com. This is a resource I've only learned about recently. And he has a ton of great answer articles about various topics about game development. Highly recommended. Pause for a sip. Oh yeah, that's good. Feel the caffeine flow through the veins. This fellow, whose name I could not find, I think he's deciding to remain anonymous, makes games for a living and can answer our questions. So let's talk about it. 80-25. And there are great visual cues, which I love. I've often mentioned the general breakdown of game player base as 80%, 20%, and 5%. 80% of players will never engage with anything beyond the game itself. 20% will bother to go online and read something about the game, and a mere 5% will be engaged so much as to actually bother to post and communicate with other players. The 5%, that's you and me. A lot of the really invested players won't accept this, and with good reason. Just look at all the posts on the forums or subreddit or whatever. There's thousands. On a busy patch day, the front page will be slammed with posts. There's no way there's only 5% or less of the game's population, right? Surely there's more than that. Or is there? The GIFs add so much value to these articles. Humans are notoriously bad at mentally handling really large numbers. Let me prove it to you. Imagine a single person. You can probably guess about how much room a single person takes up, right? A total amount of space one person occupies. And I guess not all persons are created equal. And now let's make it 10 people. Still pretty easy. 10 people in one room can take it from full to crammed pretty quickly. But it's no problem for you mentally. Now let's consider 100 people. How much room do you need for 100 fully grown adults to stand comfortably? Maybe you have an idea. You've been to a pep rally, a school dance, or a football game or something, right? Well, here's a photo of around 100 people. Okay. So you can see, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 in the front. And then the depth is like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, it's like roughly 12 by 8 people, which is about right. Very rough estimation. Sure seems like a lot. This is about the size of a usual AAA games development team. Think about 100 people all talking, sharing, laughing, conversing, arguing in one place. Think about the amount of noise that would generate. That seems like a pretty big number, but it's tiny compared to a game's player base. Surely we can think of more. Let's consider 1,000 people instead. How much room does that take? What does 1,000 people look like mentally? What does it look like? How much space does that take up? Well, here's about 1,000 people. Okay, so they're all hanging out in the town square. There's a sign there we can't read. Anyway, so that's from 100 to 1,000. Well, it looks like more than 100. That's like 10 development teams. We're looking at the entire employee base of a medium-sized publisher and its development teams. This is probably a pretty good-sized farmer's market or street fair. Think about the kind of sound this many people generate. But that's not even the end of it. 1,000 is still too small. Take it a step bigger. Try to imagine 10,000 people. I love how slow and methodical this is. This is my kind of storytelling right here. Is it still easy as 100? Can you mentally picture how much space 10,000 people will take up? How much noise 10,000 people will generate? Here's 10,000 people, and we have a stadium. All right. Lovely stadium, some flags, etc. What are they gathered around? Looks like a performance of some kind. I can't really tell. Anyway, as we scale up, it gets a lot harder to imagine, no? Look at how tiny the people are in the nosebleed seats compared to up front. That's a lot of people. This is a full house of 10,000 people at a Trump rally in Pensacola Bay Center in Florida. Oh, there's the answer. It's a good-sized concert or the show floor of a small convention. Now try to imagine 100,000. Then try 1,000,000. Not so easy, right? Here's an image of a whole lot of people. It could be 100,000 or it could be 1,000,000 people. One is merely a fraction, 10% of the other. Can you guess how many people? Oh, man. So this is an inauguration. It looks like that anyway. $6,000, $7,000. See some guesses in the chat. I wonder if he's going to tell us. Man, if this is rhetorical, I'm gonna feel very blue balled. Well, let's see what he says. And then maybe we can do some sleuthing and find the answer. But developer, what does this have to do with players and games? You might ask, somewhat confused and mind slightly boggled at the thought of trying to imagine 1,000,000 people. I don't think we're going to get an answer. Oh man, that's disappointing. Maybe we can zoom in on this. Open image in new tab. Can we figure out what this is? I mean, that's the Washington Monuments. This is a presidential inauguration. Can we tell who this is? There's two little people. Could this be the Obamas? Yeah, I think it could be. Obama inauguration. These are not very helpful pictures. Yeah, here we go. That looks familiar. Okay. So how many people were there? Hundreds of thousands. Anyway. Let's continue with our story, shall we? Now that our curiosity has been sated. So hundreds of thousands, not quite a million. Let's consider a notoriously hardcore game like Dark Souls 3. Dark Souls 3 sold roughly 3 million copies. That's a pretty big number. If you consider it, that means that the Dark Souls 3 player base is roughly the population of the great state of Iowa, or the entire nation of Albania. Okay. Now let's take a look at the Dark Souls subreddit. At the time of writing, there are roughly 100,000 and change subscribers. That means that if every single one of them posts, the subreddit represents a total sum of 3.3% of the player base. Let's see what that number is now. Reddit.com, Dark Souls. Okay. It's gotten bigger. 340K. Big's homeland. Is Big Albanian? Anyway, and we can also presume that that 3 million number has increased since then too. Anyway, why am I fact checking this? I'm totally sucking all the juice out of this argument. I'm just going to let it ride. Consider, what are the other hotspots for Dark Souls discussions? Maybe GameFAQs, maybe Wikia, maybe NeoGAF, maybe other forums. How many of these have that many users? It turns out to be around 5% on the regular, at least according to our metrics. Let's keep in mind that 5% of 3 million is 150,000 people. 150,000 of the most hardcore, most dedicated, most engaged players are the ones posting and discussing and engaging on a fairly regular basis, which is enough to fill the Rio Olympic Stadium twice over. Ooh, pretty. Imagine you're inside this fully packed stadium. From your view, there's people as far as the eye can see. Everywhere you turn, there's people. It looks huge. It feels huge. It sounds huge. And without actual numbers, it's easy to get lost in the shouting and cheering and imagine that it's like this for everybody. But it isn't. Even if you were at the Olympics, there's a lot more people at home who were watching to varying amounts of engagement. Most of them followed casually. Some might actually read additional news coverage about them. None of them were hardcore enough to actually travel to the destination, buy tickets, and engage in person. This is the equivalent of what you see on your forums. On your forums. like we're from some foreign nation. This is who posts on patch day. These are the trolls, the zealots, the armchair designers, the apologists, the haters, the fanfic writers, the modders, the data miners, and, it must be said, the podcasters. These are the hardest of the hardcore. These are clearly not representative of the casual Olympic fan. These are only a drop in the overall bucket. Now imagine that these people had no knowledge of the casual Olympic fans at home. All they know is what's in the stadium. That's all they've ever seen. 20% is 600,000 people. That's enough to fill the Rio Olympics main stadium 8 times over. It's 12 E3s put together. It's 6 San Diego Comic-Cons. It's the number of Americans killed during the American Civil War. And the total player base of 3 million is 5 times that much, roughly the size of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Phoenix, Arizona, put together. It's the size of the population of Athens, Buenos Aires, or 2 Munichs put together. Try wrapping your mind around that for a moment. All right. Are we going to get to the point here anytime soon? Do you know who actually tracks these numbers? We do. We track all of it because it's vitally important knowledge for us to make our future business decisions. When your game logs in online, we check. When you register your game on our website, we check. When you create an account for our forums, we check. When you redeem a code for DLC, we check. When you create a new character, we check. We want to know all of this information because we want to know who our players are and what they want so we can build stuff they want to buy. We're the ones with the bird's eye view, capable of looking down from far above to actually track those numbers. We have millions of data points. When I give the 80-25% breakdown, this is where we get it from. We have the bird's eye view looking down at the total numbers. But you should also get an idea of how easy it is to look around from ground level at the huge numbers around you from the crowd itself and think that this is much larger than it actually is. When you're in the middle of a crowd of 10,000, it's really hard to tell how big the group is relative to the whole. Keep in mind when you imagine the size of a AAA game's player base in the future. So this article is a little indulgent, but I dig it. And then we sell the information. That's the world we're living in, Inks. So this is great. But this is actually only article 1 of 2 I want to talk about. And it really says in visceral terms what we're all doing when we sit down here to talk. And I think it's an important perspective to keep in mind. And I do have a couple of payoffs planned for the end of this. We'll see how it feels when we get there. But let's look at the other article. And these again, both from George A. Shout out to George A. for the high quality comment and for these posts. So now that we understand the 80-25 breakdown, let's look at this article, Obtaining Feedback from Gamers, How We Do It. So, I got some responses to my last post about understanding the angry gamer. Aside from the expected results, one occurring note that stood out was that sometimes developers are in the wrong, that we have made mistakes and that we should listen. I totally agree in that we developers are sometimes wrong, that we make mistakes, that we should listen. However, that brings up a rather important question. Who should we be listening to? Pictured Asmongold. Ian Hazakostas. The answer is, of course, everyone. So today, in a special Labor Day weekend edition of AAGD, Ask a Game Dev, we can examine how developers get and parse feedback. Yeah, MMO Inks. Who are you shouting at, Inks? One thing that developers always want is feedback. We want to learn what went right, what went wrong, and how we can make things better. However, it's important to keep the big picture in mind. You always want to try to make changes that would maximize overall happiness and engagement among all players, and not just the ones who are the loudest. That means that we can't just do what the very loud minority wants. We need to be sure that it's true to the vision of the game we want to make and for the entire player base. And here it is. 80-25 total players. 80% people who have never been to the forum. 15% lurkers, 5% people who post. Hardcore. So, yeah. This is us. Right here. If you're on the stream, this is us. If you're on YouTube, you might be in the 15%. Either way, we're part of a minority here. The 80% looms. So how do we get that information? We clearly can't go from house to house asking people. We clearly can't just ask our friends and families. That's way too small a sample size and also a bit self-selecting. We can't ask random people off the street either, since there's no guarantee that they've even played the game. And we can't really just ask the forum goers for the very same reason we can't ask our friends and families. It's way too small a sample size, and they are way too self-selecting. So how do we gather this information? Our best method on gathering feedback today is actually telemetry data. Have you ever seen those stat sheets that get posted every now and then by game developers? Fact sheets like this. We've had these for Guild Wars 2, I think. This is so low resolution. I wonder if I pop it out, it'll be a little more legible. Guild Wars 2 info graphic. Yeah, here's a better example. Because we love Guild Wars 2. Yeah. Inks, what you're saying about 80% caring, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. Because I have some thoughts to share. But I want to get to the end of this article first. I want to let the argument play out. So here's some numbers. Let's see. Guild Wars 2 doubled in size. Okay, who cares? Here's some cool analytics. Number of hours on the back of a raptor or a griffin. I think this was posted in sometime in 2018. So about a year after Path of Fire came out. 620 million mount rides. Monster stat. This is always one of the most fun ones. The biggest threat. So the Earth Djinn takes out 8 foes for every time it dies. That's badass. You know, I was fighting a really badass foe on stream the other day. The branded leyline anomaly in the domain of Vabi, doing it for the Sky Scale collection. That dude's a tyrant. Took us like almost 20 minutes to kill him. Me and 2 other people. Crazy. Bog Scale. Poor Bog Scale. Anyway, you guys get the idea. Where's this data come from? We collect this data from your gameplay. Ooh, spooky. Not just you either, but the millions of players who played the game. Ever notice how so many games have a connecting to server and checking for updates message when you start the game up, even when they are single player? That's your game, letting our servers know that you started it up. How there's a little checkbox in the options that comes on by default that says upload non-personal information or something like it. That's your consent to tell us anonymous gameplay data about how you play. When you're playing and still connected, we're getting a steady drip of info from you. And we can get a lot of it. Terabytes and terabytes of data. Sorry, Darkness. The numbers don't really matter that much. It's information about games. Here's some examples that we'll all understand. How many characters you've created. Character creation details. How long you spent in the character creator. How many times you've started the game. How many times you've saved the game, you've reloaded. Again, that's more single player type stuff. How much time in a particular area. Where in those areas you spend that time, which NPCs you interact with. How much time you spend standing still. How many times you finish the game. Which abilities you use the most, which weapons you use the most. Your in-game decisions. Which menu you spend the most time in, where you die each time. Which quests you completed, how long did it take, which ones you abandoned, which ones you ignored. All that data. What do they do with it? Well, basically, our telemetry data allows us to answer the question, what did the player do? If we made it possible to do in the game, we can probably track it, and the data we get are pretty close to incontrovertible. In order to get a 99% confidence level to within a 1% margin of error on a population of 5 million players, you need a sample size of 16,600 players randomly selected from those 5 million. We get literally millions of unique data points to pull from, so our data crunching gives us a 99% accuracy within less than 0.1% error margin. Oh my god, Big Brother vibes. We can qualify even further if we want. If we wanted to know how many players cheated on their romance between Mass Effect 1 and 2, and we're also paragons above 50%, but below 100%, we can find that number. The virtuous few. All these data allow us to model the information in interesting ways. For example, this is a map called Anchor 9 from Halo Reach that is played in multiplayer. Cool. Groovy. Any Halo fans? It's in grayscale because this is actually a heat map. Sip. The brighter a spot is, the greater the number of player deaths that have occurred in that spot. This is very useful for level design tuning. You can see where the players are dying and where they aren't. And that means you can try to adjust your map to tweak that sort of gameplay in those areas. By moving power-ups or adjusting the geometry slightly, level designers can rebalance the map. Perhaps they want more deaths in the darker areas because they're underutilized. Maybe it's intentional. This is one way of checking our results and iterating on it for the future. So yeah, here's a couple of death zones right here. Around here, these hallways, pretty bright. Hey. Anyone remember playing this game? I am parched today. Another use for this telemetry data is in how and where to dispense hints. In Telltale's point-and-click adventure games, sometimes players will get stuck on a particular puzzle and won't know what to do. Telltale's designers anticipated this, however, and put in a reactive, elaborate hint system. Depending on your difficulty setting, your chances of receiving a hint from a companion character goes up for each second you stand in one place or click on screen without clicking on an interactable object. 2 examples of frustration. They track that data and use it for developing future puzzles. Oh, I'm sorry, Inks. Internet problems are the worst, dude. Is Twitch even transcoding my stuff? It doesn't usually allow transcode on it, unfortunately. Okay, so this is a normal distribution. We've all seen this. Most people fall in here, and the few and far between are at the very bottom or top. I have all the qualities. So does that mean we should completely ignore the cries of the very invested gamers? Of course not. The crucial problem with telemetry is that it doesn't answer the why. We as developers have to start doing the interpretation, and this is where the mistakes usually come in. To help avoid this, we try to listen to all of our avenues of feedback: telemetry data, hardcore fans, observations during playtests, market research surveys, and so on and so forth. What are we looking for? What we are looking for is corroborating data. If what the hardcore fans are saying doesn't match the rest of the data, it probably isn't as big a deal as the angry gamers are making it out to be. If we see anomalies in the data, we can check out what the invested fans are saying. Why are they upset? Then we can cross-check that against the surveys, market research, and financial data to make better decisions. I think it's important for the really engaged fans to remember that we are listening. We do care what you have to say, but though we do listen to you, it doesn't mean we are going to do what you want. We have millions of people who want different things, and it's important to remember that we value them too. It's okay to disagree with the developers, but I just wanted to show that we have access to a lot more information that we have to consider when we make our decisions. Far more than what you see in the forums, comment sections, and YouTube videos. Okay. And that's the article. 80-25. Whew, that was a lot. Okay. So I love those articles. You know, I've participated in gaming communities for a long time. Over 20 years. And I, like everyone else, have been surrounded by, at times, kind of a monoculture in terms of perspectives on the experiences we have. If you're playing raids in a game and you really dedicate yourself to raid content, you're probably playing with a bunch of people who have similar opinions about the way the game should be made and what's good for the game. If you're playing a shooter and all you care about is... I can't think of an easy shooter example. I'm sorry. I don't play enough modern shooters, to be honest. Shout out to PlanetSide, one of the only shooters I still play. Hey, what's up, Pibble? 420, 69, and 1? What? Why 1? Is it because it's a common denominator? So what can we use this knowledge for? I mentioned that this perspective is a blade that can cut inward. It can cut your own opinions and your own thoughts about games, and can cut outward. You can use it to cut things you see outside of yourself. So I've cut inward a lot of times with this blade already. This blade of perspective, and now I'm gonna use it to think about a few other things. Let's look at my notes here. Okay, so here's the thought experiment. And this is going to be very editorialized. It's not researched. I don't have anyone to quote. This is just what seems right to me, and I'm curious what y'all think. So, examples of places where the 20 do not agree with the 80. Y'all know what I'm talking about? This, Inks, you were talking about this a few moments ago. About how, what did you say? Scrolling. Does the 80% care? Do they even give feedback? So this is what I like to think about is, how do the 20% diverge in their thinking about games compared to the 80%? And when we're thinking about this, we need to remember that the 80% are people who just play the game at face value. They're not communicating with outside the game. They're not going to YouTube. They're not going to forums. They're not going to Wiki. They're just logging in, playing the game on its own terms. And I wrote down 3 different ideas, and they all start with the letter C for some reason. God knows why. The first one's convenience. And this is a 20%er hot take. I'm a 20%er. Convenience items create incentives to create inconvenience. We get this, right, y'all? We all are on the same page about this. If you create an inconvenience in a game, you can create a quest, a microtransaction, something to sell that convenience back to the player. That's a 20%er take. 80%er take is convenience item is good for me and I like it. Therefore, I go get it. Or I don't like it and I don't play the game. And I stop giving my data. The second letter C is connections. These takes are harder than I thought they were when I wrote them down, actually. C, the second, is connections. The 20% take on connections. People who are out here on Reddit, on Twitch, on YouTube, forging the narrative about the game on social media. Whatever game it is, whatever community you care about. 20%ers might say something like this. Connections to humans are the true payoffs of online games. This is at least something that I believe. I think it's where games are at their most interesting. Here's an 80%er take, though. As long as people don't get in my way, I don't mind if they exist. Think about skill-based matchmaking with strangers. Think about open world events and MMOs. Think about all these transactional ways that modern games design the connectivity out of social gaming. But those who lean in, those who give a shit, take the time to connect with others, because that's where the true value is. Again, bit of a hot take. The last one that I wrote down is cosmetics. 20% are take on cosmetics. Cosmetic items make accomplishments in the game feel cheap. And I guess I could have written down cash shop here. I think cash shop would have been a better third one. Which is that cash shop microtransactions make accomplishments in games feel cheap. I really believe this. I talked about this many times. There are a lot of takes about this on the internet. Recently, Asmongold, his take on the New World cash shop and Burning Crusade Classic with its store amount and all that stuff have gone kind of viral, echoing this very sentiment. But what does the 80% think? Well, from what I can tell, the 80% seems to think, I like things on the cash shop, and I will buy them. Again, the way I'm kind of generally characterizing this is that the 80% don't engage deeply with these things. They just take them at face value. They're not contending, necessarily, with the depth. And a big part of that is because they're not exposing what they think about the game to other humans with different ideas. The more you expose your ideas to the broader world around you, the more refined your ideas become. That's why I get on stream a couple times a week, by the way. It's because I want my ideas not to suck, and y'all help me make them suck less. All right, now where do my notes go? Oh, how can you tell what the 80% think? I like this question a lot. I think this is really important. What do you guys think? Any thoughts? I have one thought about this, about how to figure out what the 80% thinks. Inks metrics, yes, that's a good one. Lex, look at the gaming trends. Yep. Henry, to me, we're more like a D&D group where you're the DM and we're the players derailing your carefully crafted adventure. Well, a good dungeon master makes the anomalies part of the experience. That's what I'm trying to do, Henry. Darkness, I don't know. So who the fuck are the 5%? That's us. We're the 5%. Actually, the 20% Pibble are us plus the people who watch our stuff silently. Lex, 80% is where the money is. The publishers will tell you what they want by what they implement. Yes. So what I wrote down here, which is very similar to what y'all are saying, is the way you can tell what the 80% think is by watching to see what game publishers with existing audiences do with their games. If you see a trend of cash shops, we know that that's what the 80% are telling those publishers to do with their actions and their metrics. If you see boosts being sold in your games, you know the 80% are showing that they want that. Skill-based matchmaking, all these social systems of alienation that are becoming more and more prevalent in our curated online pseudo-social experiences. Boy, I'm sounding like a little bit of a zealot here. This is the green room part of the talk. But I think we're on the same page. Am I right? Tibble, I have a couple hacker talks to throw at you about this topic. I'll find them and put them in your Discord. Definitely do. I'd love to see that. Social engineering of game design. Ooh, that sounds fascinating. Robbie, the cash shops are for the 0.5% whales. Yes, okay. So there's that too. So I don't have any notes written down for that topic, Robbie, but I think you made a very salient point. Inks, I have a question if they want that or if they're just willing to buy that. Then you have to ask, do they want that because if you design the game the way or because they really want it? Yeah. And that is where the end of the article we just read comes into mind, right? Where you're combining the metrics and the things that people say. And I think that's actually just pretty hard to do. I think it's just pretty hard to do. So the last note I have for this talk about 80-25. This is a fun one. I asked myself, what are the times when the 20% won? What are the times when the 20%ers, the people who care, actually had what they wanted represented better in a game than what the 80%, the silent majority, want? Or at least more than the 20-80 split seems to indicate would be wise. And I came up with a couple of examples. And this is my World of Warcraft Blizzard hot take, which is World of Warcraft, especially with retail, raids and high-end content like mythic dungeons and arenas. This is content that is not played by the 80% of World of Warcraft retail players. These people are making alts. They're doing professions. They're grinding out cosmetics. They're doing drip feed single player content. Maybe they'll do casual dungeons and LFR, which is the match made raid experience, which is kind of like the easy mode of raids. But World of Warcraft and Blizzard puts a ton of energy into making their game playable at the highest end. They put a ton of energy into balancing all the game specializations so that as well as that possible, they all have some representation at the highest end of content. And the creators who play that content have a lot to do as a result. Ink says, when you make a big enough deal, the mainstream media picks up on it and makes it a story. Yeah, so this is actually, what you just said is very adjacent to my second example that I have, which is actually a Guild Wars 2 thing. So y'all remember Guild Wars 2 mounts, right? Came out with Path of Fire. And when they came out, there was this question in the community. I mean, we kind of all knew the answer, right? But how were mount skins going to be acquirable? How are we going to be able to change the looks of our raptors, of our skimmers, of our griffins, all these lovely mounts? And the answer came forth shortly after the expansion launch with cash shop mount loot boxes, where you bought a mount box and you got one random skin within it out. And immediately, this topic became a controversial in the community, and it actually flowed over to having media coverage outside the community. The normal 20%, what did I write down? Response exceeded the traditional bounds of the 20%. And I'm specifically thinking of Jim Sterling here. If you think of YouTube as mainstream, I think Jim Sterling is part of the mainstream game media at this point, which I think he would hate to hear me say. But I think at a certain point of popularity, that's just what happens. And so what happened? Well, the internet spoke and internet responded. And they gave us the mount selection licenses, where we can pay, instead of paying $5 for a random mount, we can pay $12 for a mount of art that we select ourselves. And then the internet quieted down. So sometimes when there's something that happens that is so obviously wrong, so obviously against the morals and values of the 20%, the response of a 20% can be so loud that it creates this like resonance waveform that overflows the tank of the community and gets the people on the outsides wet, and then they complain. And when that happens, there's potential for change. So another good example I just thought of this phenomenon is the New World Cash Shop. Asmongold, who is a World of Warcraft dude, I think had the biggest role to play in the whatever changes New World decided to make about their cash shop. And New World is a game, no mistake about it. I've said this before. New World is an IP that is searching for a game. It is trying to find a game that you want to play. We'll see if they arrive to one. I hope they do. And the cash shop seems to be part of that process of seemingly naive iteration. Dude, I don't know Final Fantasy. Or, sorry, I use the word dude in a genderless sort of way. I don't want to presume. But I don't know Final Fantasy. You've got to get like Raka or someone on here to give the Final Fantasy perspective. I'll talk next time I see him. I'll talk to him. I'm actually working with Raka about potentially doing some content in the future. Pretty excited about that. You are a dude in a genderless sort of way. Excellent. Excellent. I am too. Pibble, microtransactions are a thing that exists because they were novel 8 years ago, and then the bandwagon of profiteers have ruined the format. I gotta think about that, Pibble. Robbie, you meant that Asmon's is a Final Fantasy dude now. Oh, is he actually playing the game? I know he was thinking about it. I don't follow his day-to-day movements. I just see the stuff from him that tends to... I see the tallest peaks of Asmongold. Let's put it that way. Inks, they aren't micro anymore. Big true. Big true. Yeah, you know, I actually found myself paying $25 for a premium Raptor mount. Guild Wars 2, coming back to this again, is a game that I have loved and still love, but I haven't been a daily active player since 2018. And one of the last patches where I played the game actively, I bought the Armored Raptor mount for $25. I still feel weird whenever I put that skin on, because it's kind of a representation of like... of something. I'm not too sure what. Robbie, not sure, but you suspect he'll get very sucked in. I mean, a lot of people like Final Fantasy. I'm actually kind of tempted to give it a try, even though I really don't have any interest in the Final Fantasy IP. and the whole general aesthetic of Final Fantasy. Pibble, when they were novel, they allowed for ongoing profit from the game minus subscription model. Yeah, like thinking about like the Elder Scrolls, right? Like that's what I was thinking about. I think about Horse Armor, the very first DC for like a core gamer game. And then what were the other two DLCs for Oblivion? There was Shivering Isles, which is badass, like a proper expansion, and there was Knights of the Nine. I never played Knights of the Nine. I don't know. I think Pibble, we're all core gamer games, like thinking about consoles and PCs, are learning from mobile games. Mobile games is where the crazy experimentation is happening. I think that's where most of the money is made in gaming these days. It's funny to think that we put so much effort and thought into MMOs that are played on consoles and PCs, but I think compared to mobile games, they don't make nearly as much money. I'll have to double check that, but I think that's true. Mobile gaming is nuts. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, having a game in your pocket is like, how do you beat that? I don't know. I'm right there with you, Inks. All right. Well, folks, that's the talk. Um, I'm gonna hang out with the stream here for a little while longer, but I'm gonna close this up for YouTube. Once again, I'm Deeg. These are my thoughts. Streamed weekly here on Twitch on Monday nights. Come by, hang out, and tell us what you think. Especially if you think I'm wrong about something. I really want to hear from you. Comments are great too. Yeah, that's my pitch. I'll see y'all later.